we're going to start the final council meeting, 14th of December. So we'll start with our karakia. Thank you. Now we've got apologies this morning from Councillor Johnson and Councillor Nalo, so I'll remove those, seconded by, this hands is going everywhere. Councillor Waddle. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. I've got no public forum this morning. Have I got any conflicts of interest? No? Okay. Confirmation of minutes from the 30th of November. And the 7th of December extraordinary meeting. So I will put those, seconded by Councillor Leggett. Any issues with anybody? All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Report of the Mayor. Sorry, the Mayor's tired today. She's had too many nights out in a row. I want to thank Wendy and all the staff, along with all you councillors, for the huge amount of work you've got through this year. It's certainly been a big one. The district plan obviously is a highlight for me, along with the Māori and Pacific strategies. With the change of government and our communities under financial pressure, we're going to have a tough year ahead of us, so I can only hope for political help with the Three Waters. And I'm told we may get an announcement on that today, so fingers crossed. We've had plenty of prize givings. We've had Bishop Viard, Whitby Collegiate and Porirua College. We've had Creekfest, Discovery School and Ngāti Toa School markets. We've had the opening of the commemorative park at Titahi Bay on the Marines Hall site. I've been to two amazing concerts, the Porirua Trust Band with Virtuo Strings and the Malaga The Journey. We've celebrated with our planting and harbour volunteers, and we've had a JP, thank you. Done the English Language Partners Christmas event with lots of performance and cultures. I've joined Harota Marae with Kylie to celebrate the 10-year opening of the Wharanui, and then experience the 26 women getting their moku done, which was really wonderful. Attended the Riding for Disabled Christmas function, the Porirua Women's Centre afternoon tea. We've had the Titahi Bay Intermediate Prize giving, Kura Street, Titahi Bay as well. Then the Poro Cadet Awards last night. And today we have the police graduation. Kylie's off to that, and I'm going to the Porirua Kapimana Police Awards at the same time, because even the police are busy, everything's clashing. And so this Friday I'll see you all again, because we've got the Māori Strategy celebration at 8 o'clock at Pātaka, and then we've got the Pacific Strategy celebration with the night markets at Kennons Creek in the evening. And I can't forget Christmas in the Park this Saturday. I'm sure some of you will be along, and Councillor Waddle will be celebrating a significant birthday that day. So happy birthday, Nathan. So I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I hope you all get a break and come back ready for the LTP next year. So, taku.
And that is 2 words, mana tangata. All the constraints and pressures Council's been under this year, and the things that we've had to deal with in terms of constraints, both fiscal and socially, and we've held each other's mana up very, very well. I know in some other areas or other circumstances there'll be cups flying across the table, but you've managed to hold on to it very, very well, and I just want to extend that sort of accolade towards councillors. If I certainly have one thing to do is take a good break, have a good rest, and we'll get back into it next year. So kia ora.
Thank you. Okay, no petitions, so we move to our first report, the draft submission on the Greater Wellington Regional Plan Change, Natural Resources. So you'll see it there. I'll move it to put it on the table, seconded by Councillor Hayward. Any questions on that or any? Yes, Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora kouroumatua, me he kai kanahira katoa. I thank you to officers for preparing the report. He pātai. Is there anything in the plan change to their natural resources plan that limits the ability of council working in conjunction with mana whenua around the appropriate ways, should it want to resolve some the challenges that are actually facing our waterways here. Because I'm just mindful that I think that there may need to be a bit more imagination in the future in terms of how we share accountability and how we also look at being practical in getting these things done.
Hand it over to either of you.
Yeah, morning, ngā mihi kia koutou. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, freshwater is obviously hugely important to Ngāti Toa, and there's, there's a long history with this whaitoa process, and Ngāti Toa came up with their own separate implementation plan at one point. You'll see in the submission that we're generally supportive of the mode of travel. It's just about how, how expensive it is to get there and how long it takes, basically. There are a few things in there that we think are of concern to, that may be of concern to Ngāti Toa, so we've shared our submission with them. One of them is it's a prohibited activity to develop greenfield land, which includes a few blocks of land that are either owned by Ngāti Toa or will be owned by Ngāti Toa in the future. So, it'll be good to work in partnership with them as we go through this hearings process. There are action plans and so forth in Plan Change 1, and we've sought to partner with Greater Wellington and Ngāti Toa to deliver those, as we have with the harbour strategy. So.
He pata tuarua. I can't find the reference, it's loading very slowly on Diligent here, but there was a conversation about a definition with regards to whether or not the definition used by Greater Wellington incorporated private property owners in terms of repairs to and upkeep of Three Waters. Are you aware of what I'm talking about in terms of the definition section? The feedback from the council was that the presumption was that it was that the meaning was to cover only the the non-private parts of the network. Yeah,
from memory, we've sought to just clarify that they are talking about the public network with that definition I think you're talking about. And we've made a broader point in terms of achieving the E. coli levels that, even if we were to aim for this 2040 time frame and met those rates rises to pay for it, it's still a big challenge. So,
sup on that. Can council give us a steer within our own territory? What are the largest private owners that would have private networks that could be if the definition that has been as a clarification of the definition that's been sought by the council is actually not correct?
Yeah, sorry. So half of the network by length is on private property, and I think that's just the cumulative all of the small sewer laterals that connect from buildings to our network. So I'm not sure what the largest is within a property, but I think it's lots of cumulative little ones, and as you probably know, a lot of them leak. They certainly do in my neighbourhood. So there's a huge, to meet that 2040 time frame, it's not just that public investment, but there needs to be an equally large private investment as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. No more questions.
Councillor Trillin.
Thank you very much, Mayor Baker. I just had a couple questions. So first, I wonder, in terms of the process that has played out so far, to what degree have we had any engagement from GW officers around this? And the reason I ask that is that a number of these things appear to be, often when we do a submission, it might be around some of the detail and things we can work in, and there are a number of things here that are radically at odds with council's ability to deliver and with the proposed district plan as well. And I wonder if you could just speak to, has there been any engagement? Because I struggle to see how we've even gotten this far, to be honest.
Territorial authorities in the region were given a pre-draft, which we could give comments on, and we only had 10 days to give comments. So we provided comments that are very similar to what we've provided today in this draft for you to look at. Nothing, as far as we could tell, had changed as a result of our comments. So I've personally spoken to the general manager at Greater Wellington to say, well, it's very concerning. You gave us this chance to actually give some comments, and yet nothing appears to have changed. We also asked for a meeting with Greater Wellington officers to understand and discuss the plan change, which Tory attended on our behalf. So we've had that engagement with them to understand where they're coming from. Apart from that, there hasn't been much forthcoming.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'm just highlighting this because it seems to me, and I think it's been confirmed here, that we've had very little engagement on this, and as a result, we're being asked to implement targets, like look at the E. coli targets I've talked about here, and admirable, we want to aim for that sort of thing, but we'll be looking at north of 30% rates rises to achieve that. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I guess very concerning. I like the idea of us working with GW. This feels like we're working against each other. So I'll just highlight that for the process that they followed through on so far. In relation to the unplanned greenfield maps, there was the comment around the need for GW officers to engage with council planning officers to ensure that they can accurately reflect the hearing panel's decisions being released this month. Has there been any initial outreach from GW about this, or are you confident that this will happen?
No, there hasn't been any specific discussion on those areas, and it's the nature of a regional plan that it has immediate legal effect from when it's notified. So it's quite different to a district plan, which is only operative once you get to the decisions. So those maps, unplanned greenfield growth, are at odds with our district plan that was approved last week. So the biggest one would be those blocks up in Waitangiroa, so Landcorp and a bit of land Silverwood own, which are now would be a prohibited activity to develop. And as I mentioned earlier, the whole of Hongaweka has been left off, which is quite possibly an oversight. So I guess the regional council, if they see those as big areas, have the ability to do a variation to the plan to remedy them immediately. Otherwise, we're just into the hearings process and submissions to try and get them changed.
Yeah. Would the sorts of concerns that have been raised by GW through this plan already been litigated through the district plan process?
Yeah, I mean, their intention for having these unplanned greenfield areas is they want to have a say in the land use, basically. So they want to have, rather than, the district councils going along and rezoning land like the Northern Growth area, and then they come along afterwards and do their regional consents. They want to be the decision makers in terms of does it go ahead at all. So that's the intent of making it a prohibited activity. Is if you wanted to develop a new piece of land that was outside our district plan, you need to do a plan change to both the district plan and the regional plan. So that'd obviously be quite an expensive thing to do. So it means we won't be very flexible for rezoning any new land, but that's their intent anyway.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So yeah, I guess in principle, I definitely support this submission. And I think a lot of the targets and objectives in the draft plan, I think, are admirable, and I'd love for us to work with GW around what we can achieve, but it has to be achievable, and 30% rates rises and north of 20% rates rises every year following that, it just isn't. So you really support this, and thank you for putting it together.
Through you, Chair, just to add to my answer previously, of course, this is partly also implementing the Whātua recommendations, and that was a whole process in itself. So there was a lot of engagement, as I understand it, on the Whātua side of the thing. It's the other side that I was talking about when I answered previously.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett?
I support this as well, and I particularly support the strong pushback in that you've talked about already. In fact, that these targets are unachievable, even though they're admirable. They're unachievable. A, from a practical perspective, and B, from a financial perspective. So, absolutely support the pushback. It's just ridiculous. However, the other thing I wanted to raise is what Josh raised around Greenfields development. I've been sitting on the future development strategy hearings, and the whole issue of greenfields has come up, and I just wonder whether you've got a comment about the relationship between the future development strategy and what you've talked about in here in terms of the panel decisions in the district plan, and also what Greater Wellington is doing itself. There appears there's some confusion there. Like if it's not in the if it's not in the future development strategy, but is in Greater Wellington's material, both the same. There are confusing signals to developers and to what might be able to happen in the future.
Yes, through you. You're absolutely correct. So the future development strategy and our district plan are aligned. This is not aligned with those two documents, and so I don't know if it's confusion or if it's on purpose. So I can't speak to that because I haven't got inside knowledge of what they're in their planners' minds, but it's certainly a problem across the entire region. So at least Lower Hutt and Wellington and us are all going in very strongly on this matter.
It appears that it's particularly up the coast where there were developers who came to talk about, particular parcels of land which were not included in the future development strategy and haven't been, captured elsewhere as well. So it is a bit of a worry going forward, because that future development strategy is basically a central planning tool that it appears to me that Greater Wellington wants to use to, and all of us in principle, to guide where development goes, greenfields versus brownfields, but limit greenfield development because of issues around emissions and transport and those sorts of things. However, you need to ensure that it's not so tight as to not allow greenfield development where it meets criteria. So that's a real worry to me in this.
Yes, and if I could add, Greater Wellington are a party to the future development strategy, so completely bizarre.
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Waddle.
I think you took the words right out of my mouth with that. I think it's it's not only bizarre; it seems very out of touch. And and you alluded to before that we're not the only council in the region that are having this issue. It baffles me that the council for our region can't seem to be up to play with what the region's doing. I got contacted by some residents last week who sort of were concerned around the rural land, or the expectation on rural landowners to vegetate their properties quite substantially. But there doesn't seem to be any mention of fire breaks or alleviating the risk of fire hazard in there. Have you had any thought on that, or has that come through in your thinking?
No, it's possibly a good point. I mean, the plan requires that highly erosion-prone lands and they're mapped are planted with 50% woody vegetation by I forget the date, 2050 or something. So there's a requirement for a huge amount of planting, and there is fire risk with new plantings, especially as they get going. And maybe it's something we could look at for the submission if you think it's something that's.
I think a comment about that would be really cool, because I think it's it's a concern for our rural residents as well, because it's a lot of green space and that's a lot of their livelihood that could go up in literal smoke. If that's possible to add that into the submission, that'd be awesome.
We've got till tomorrow, so.
Excellent. And I just want to thank you guys for a fantastic submission. I think it makes them going to make them think really hard about what they're doing or what they're not doing. Thank you.
Well, and the power they think they have over councils and the costs. So thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Thank you. We move to significant and engagement deliberations report. I'll move it, put it on the table, seconded by Councillor Wehapi. Open for discussion. Anybody? Just let you get to it. No questions from anyone? Okay. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. We move to our dog control annual report. I move it to put it on the table, seconded by Councillor Hayward. Open for discussion. Councillor Hayward?
And I was just going to go find my questions that I had written up. So, again, thank you to the officers for preparing the report. Obviously, councillors around the table will be have been eagerly anticipating this data for some time. The first question I had was with regards to those owners who have been offered to take up the desexing service, and I noticed that 40 dog owners have done so. What is that as a proportion? How many people chose not to in spite of being, because it's alluded to in the paragraph, I'm just going to find the number.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. There was, it's only an estimate from what the officers tell me, but there was probably almost the same amount that didn't present. So there would have been 80 that just didn't show for some reason or another.
Okay. The next question is, with regard to our microchipping stats, how do we ascertain the total number of dogs to reach that number? What methodology do we use to? Because obviously it's almost you can't count the number of dogs you have if you don't know how many dogs there are in order to get a sense of how many dogs are microchipped.
So these are the stats for dogs that we have on council record.
Oh, right. And
the microchip numbers are recorded.
So just so I'm clear here, sorry, here, Mana, am I understanding that it's the proportion of those with microchips as a subset of all dogs that are currently registered?
Yeah, it's all known dogs. There's always going to be dogs that we're finding every day, but the ones that have been recorded, we've recorded their microchip numbers as well.
Okay, I appreciate that, and it has been noted in the report about the amount of resources that are spent to deal with specific issues, including dogs that run loose around in the city. Have officers ever considered the possibility of looking at a more graduated system of probation for those who are the most, for those types of situations where you have recidivist dogs being released out as a way of being able to create a more escalated system of enforcing the dog control bylaws?
We do use that system, and we have made a number of dog owners probation this year because of repeated reports of their dog getting loose and uncontrolled. So we try and educate, we infringe, and if that doesn't work, and then once your infringements build to 3, you're made probation. So that has happened this year.
Is there any merit in looking at a earlier step in for probation, considering we still have a high number of dogs that are roaming, reported as roaming, based on the stats here?
I think it works well. I know the stats don't look like that, but across the board, at the statistics you're looking at, it's not unique to our city, and in fact it's region and nationwide. I believe we're responding well to it. As soon as dogs are reported, they're called through to our team and we respond immediately. And if you see our impounding records have doubled, that just shows you we're out there and we're getting them. Yeah, I'm just really proud of my team for the efforts that they've put in this year around coping with the increase, including dog attacks, roamings, and I believe we've responded and acted appropriately.
Okay, last question. You raised the point about the increase in impounding dogs, and obviously this has led to officers working on improvements to the facilities where dogs are being kept. Will that those improvements make it easier in terms of the ability for council to look after dogs once they've been impounded or in the care of the council after impounding?
Unfortunately, a lot of these uncontrolled dogs are coming from properties managed by organisations like Kāinga Ora, and they're not all fenced. We do have a meeting scheduled for the new year where myself and SPCA are going to talk about the issues that we're facing and try and come up with some management of those properties. So I'm hoping it will be a proactive engagement to try and tackle those issues.
One comment, thank you very much for that response. And in addition to the work around improved signage, I accept your point about the hard work that has been done by officers in this space and hope that they can continue to do so. My ongoing concern is making sure that the resourcing is adequate for the level of service around this, because for me the stats do need to have a demonstrable decrease over time, and I think that that's a debate that councillors around this table are going to continue to have moving forward. With that, kia ora.
Kia ora.
Councillor, are we happy?
Thank you. Kia ora, Suzanne. Hey, just following up from Councillor Hayward's comments around doubling the numbers and the impounding, I was a little bit upset to see that the euthanasia numbers have almost doubled, but actually in turn that actually tells me that our officers are actually more proactive in going out there and collecting these dogs. So where there is a little bit of upset, there's always a silver lining. So I totally acknowledge that and the work that your teams do, that your team does. Sorry, I want to talk about. We've been talking for a while now about the de-sexing opportunity here in Porirua, and I feel like it's just taking a little bit too long, because we talked about this last year prior to the elections, and I noticed that the Hut recently had a huge de-sexing drive out there and in Wellington, and I'm just wondering, when's Porirua going to get their turn?
I'm hoping this year, Kylie. Sorry, Councillor Lehapi. I'm working with SPCA currently, and we're putting a paper through to their heads to try and bring the de-sexing caravan to Porirua, and they'll be on site on council depot land, and we'll help facilitate that. Basically, it's free. And we have to put a case forward to bring it to Porirua. So I'm working with them, and we're hopeful to bring it to Porirua and offer that to our residents this year.
Very elated to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Trillin?
Cheers, thank you. Just a very quick question around signage. So seen, just looking at paragraph 14, where there's been the signage improvements, and in particular, I've had a resident engage me a couple of times over the last year or so around the signage at Endeavour Park. I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit more about what the improvements and updated signage that have been installed there at Endeavour Park involves.
I believe there were just minor updates of placement of signs about the dogs. That wasn't something I was personally involved in, but was the parks team. And I believe that person got an update into the updates at that park. So at our level, we haven't received any complaints in regards to any issues at the park.
Cool, perfect, thank you very much.
Okay, yep, Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, in the service response, I see 20 incidents of stock roaming. Who pays for that? What sort of penalties imposed on farmers for that?
I guess that's quite low for the course of a year, and generally farmers are pretty good and look after their own. And we're normally just herding it in the next sort of field, and we have good contact with farmers. They all know each other. As soon as you pick up the phone, they're ringing around and they know whose it is. Most times when we do get out there, it's resolved, it's south before we even get there. So generally not a big issue for stock. So yeah, we don't charge for those services.
Okay, no more questions? All right, it's moved and seconded. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Thank you. 10.4, reform of local water services in the Wellington region. I'll move it to put it on the table. Seconded by Councillor Ford. Yes, please.
Kia ora, councillors. This report has come about because of an agreement across the region to canvass these issues with each council. So it doesn't require a decision. We're still awaiting decisions out of government, but it was an attempt to kind of put in front of you and in front of the public the issues that we consider collectively are important for any future water entities. So time is, I gather that there is an imminent announcement. A number of us met the Minister of Local Government last night about the water shortage issue in the region, and he said there was an imminent announcement about water reform. He wasn't any clearer than that, but so events may overtake this paper anyway, but for what it's worth, here are the collective thoughts right now. And as you can see, some of the critical success factors that we think are important are the balance sheet separation, which we've talked about quite a lot, and some other factors are in the appendix. So just here for your consideration and discussion.
Councillor Trillin.
Thanks very much, Mayor Baker. My question was around that issue of balance sheet separation and the city deals potential that has been highlighted. I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more to what exactly is a city deal, and do we have any indication that something like that would be able to achieve that critical requirement of balance sheet separation?
City deals, I think they were spawned in the UK, but that's where both Manchester, Sheffield, and there are a number of examples there, and Australia has a number of examples as well. Typically, they are driven by a desire to get some economic growth in a region and amongst a wider than a single council. And they are a partnership between business, government and local government, typically to Joe Miller, CE at the Hut, was involved in the Sheffield one, which was about trying to diversify their manufacturing base, and they looked at the skills deficit in their region, and so they had quite a big push towards skills. Here, they often do fund infrastructure that will give some value uplift economically, and there's some deals generally done that the local government all local governments will benefit from that value uplift. Typically here we talk about GST receipts, etc. But I think water reform will go ahead of city deals. I think every council in the country, with the possible exception of us, is looking at city deals. But I was in a meeting yesterday with a government official who pointed out that water reform is in the government's 100-day plan and city deals are not. So I don't think a lot of people are making that connection in the sector that we could get a city deal that would include water. I'm gathering that that is not the government's intention. They don't see city deals as a begging bowl for infrastructure deficit. They're looking for opportunity and benefit, and then there will be some costs that come with that they might be prepared to do a deal on. So I think local governments kind of leapt to the conclusion that they're a happy match for one another, and I'm not sure that that is true. I mean, that's obviously a personal view, but if you look at what they have said in their 100-day plan, they do not have city deals in that. So they are keen on it, and it is part of the manifesto agreements, but I think it's a longer run thing. And I gather the Manchester city deal took 10 years to create. So we would want water reform to go rather quicker than that. So I think water reform will come before city deals.
Okay, and yeah, I agree with your view around it not being the appropriate tool for me. That the water crisis we have in New Zealand at the moment is a nationwide problem, and I think any solution can't be dealt with on a council by council basis. It has to be broader than that. And I guess going into this, my concern is that the government obviously has to do something on water because this is such a big issue everywhere. We're going to see that proposal soon. And I suspect, because there's obviously been a degree of demonstration of understanding that things like balance sheet separation need to be achieved, that we're basically going to see a rehashed water reform policy very similar to what the previous government proposed, just with everything related to treaty compliance and engagement with Māori being stripped out of it. And I think, given the fact that we've seen so far, I think clear indication from all three of the coalition parties in the new government of I would say an actively anti-Māori approach, that we're really firm when we're engaging around that about actually the co-governance elements of the initial water reform were based on treaty compliance. And we know from our own experience in Porirua and our engagement and partnership with Ngāti Toa that that is a good thing and it achieves better outcomes. And we need to be really, really firm on that. So yeah, support what's in this report, and I just think being really clear about our experience and the importance of that good faith engagement with Māori is going to be very important. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, we can talk about balance sheet separation and all the benefits of that. That's good for council. It ain't going to be good for ratepayers. Ratepayers are going to be paying a whole lot more money for water.
Councillor Hayward.
Just at the time I start speaking, our kaumatua leaves the room, and I'm mindful of the phrase he said, mana tangata, at the start of this. So I'm going to apologise in advance if I fail to meet that expectation. I have spoken as a councillor twice on this subject with regards to affordable water care, otherwise known as Three Waters reform. And so I do resonate strongly with the points made in this document and applaud councils across the region for showing leadership and trying to deal with the consequences of the government's so far attempt to break without repair. I'm not going to rehash the arguments about the merits of the previous government's approach. It wasn't perfect, and the watering down, pun intended, of those reforms should serve as an example of why it is important to hold your ground and carry on through. We are now beset by a situation where it looks like we're going to go right back to the drawing board again, rehashing exactly the same problems as we did before. The loser in this situation are those ratepayers, householders, businesses, and anyone else who relies upon safe delivery of water services and an expectation to improve Te Manawatu Wai. I am trying to withhold my anger at the perfidy that occurred in the election. And I am also mindful to respect the mana of voters and their will. They've delivered the decision, that's what we've got. But I will say this, if you voted National, if you voted New Zealand First, if you voted ACT, and you are upset when the rates bill comes because we are now having to meet the cost of something that we thought was resolved under a system that was better than the status quo, please contact the Minister of Local Government, the Minister responsible for water reform, and the Prime Minister, because we're trying to be the ones who are trying to fix things. Don't confuse us with those other guys.
Councillor
My
Hayward.
last point.
We do not play politics at this table.
My last
We are
point is
here.
this. My last point is this. It should be clear that no matter what system is in place, we are going to pay more. Councillor Duncan's view seems to create a false equivalency here. Everybody was going to pay, no matter which way this was going, because it is the culmination of 30 years of a system that has failed collectively, and we are all part of that, inheritors of that, and now we're trying to fix it. So there is no magic situation that either central government, local government, or some overseas entity was going to save us in terms of dealing with it. We were all going to have to pay. Any commentary to the contrary about that, or presuming that there wasn't that case, is again politicking by another guise. Kia ora.
Thank you. I do remind everybody we do not do politics at this council. We are very good at doing just what our ratepayers want. I know some of you aren't happy with what we've got. We have to move forward with what's going to be delivered to us, and I'm hopeful we will get a new water entity of some description to help us out. So, Councillor, are we happy?
Very short. I just want to say that everyone has a right to safe drinking water, and that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. It has been said and moved, so all those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Right. What are we up to? Sorry. Delegation to Chief Executive for water restrictions, 10.5. I will move that. It's fairly standard. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. So now we move to 10.6, our long-term plan direction. Move it, put it on the table, seconded by Councillor Leggett. I'm moving the recommendation that is on the screen because we had a change in 2 and 3. We've added the words using the first 3 years of the Wellington Water Capital Program is included in attachment 3, and number 3 was in the following table, which allows the Wellington Water Capital Program budget. So I'm going to open that up to Roy to. I've had a seconder from Councillor Leggett. Yep. Would you like to lead it? Thank you, Roy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just talk generally about the finances and talk then specifically about the recommendation up there, if that's okay.
Yep.
So since we looked at the headroom model a number of months ago, there have been a number of moving parts to come up with the actual rate number, so both up and down. In particular, the advice from Greater Wellington on the water levy of a 27% increase, which on top of last year's was a cumulative effect of over 50%. That water levy increase has added 1.5% to our rates this year. Another point I'd just like to note that our growth has slowed somewhat, so we are using a growth component of 0.75% growth for the first 3 years of the LTP, and then moving back to 1% beyond that. In particular, the Wellington Water Program, which we have attended as Appendix 3. That's their preferred approach, and the interesting thing is that over the 3 years they're coming in slightly lower than our original program, but it highlights the fact that they could not deliver the program at the year 1 of the LTP at the 50 million that we had proposed. So the 70 million level is being reflected in those recommendations there. So over the 3 years it's less. It delivers what you need in the first year in particular, and the rates have been adjusted to reflect that change, what you're seeing there. I just want to point out how to, when you're talking to your community, how those rate numbers actually mean. So the table there, you'll see the bottom there, which is the total rate increase. That actually is the dollar difference between what we would strike in rates for the year versus what revenue we received from the previous year. We then assume we will get from new ratepayers, they'll contribute 0.75% of that cost, which means for existing ratepayers, which is how we always express it, the rate increase from them is at that 17.5% level. So that's for existing ratepayers. I think that's the key components to the paper there. It's pretty detailed there. Happy to take some questions on it, Chair, but fundamentally that recommendation I think will work. It will deliver what you want in terms of the three waters, particularly in the first year because of the high carryover cost of some significant projects that we're already are in flight, so to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward?
Kia ora, Anor. Thank you for the preparation of the report and the explanation for the Chair's recommendation. I actually want to cover off point 29 with regards to the inflation assumptions. Can officers give some clarity as to how they have developed the 4% figure for general inflation and the major contracts for 6%? And does this reconcile with the inflationary rates in previous terms actual as opposed to projected?
Through you, Chair. The inflation factors in paragraph 29, if I could just talk to start from the bottom. The insurance, or actually all four of them were indicated in the previous paper that went to Council on the 16th. The general rate, 4%, is roughly based upon our the Burl numbers that came out, which we, I think, have attached in previous papers to give you some indication. The major contracts, we had identified that over the previous years, the increases in those major contracts, which tend to be for both downers and EnviroWaste up at the landfill, that they have built into their contracts inflation provisions, which tend to be more than the Burl numbers. And we put to Council previously that we believe that those numbers should actually reflect the Burl 4% plus 50%, which is how we got to the 6% number there. And of course, the bulk water levy is the number that we've been given by Greater Wellington. And we had talked previously about the likely increase from insurance. We had only previously had 4%, but market indications are indicating it was around the 20%, which is an additional 600,000 for that. I trust that is sufficient detail. I'm happy to give more.
Once up, owing to the fact that I was actually unwell and couldn't actually discuss this matter at that point in time, but still abide by the Council's decision on that with regards to that decision, I still seek clarity about the actual inflationary impacts in previous terms, and does that match for Porirua, and does that match up against the figure of 4% developed from the Burl index figures that are used in this assumption?
Through you, Chair, every year we use, I think, the Burl numbers to increase or provide an annual budget. So that is the basis we've used every year. I'd have to suggest that in recent years the Burl numbers, and overall they have tend to be more conservative, and we've tended to see that issue cause us problems with revaluations. So the revaluations that we get every 2 or 3 years for our assets are coming in significantly higher than what the Burl numbers have been and what we have used. And councillors, you might recall that I think in one of the previous papers for the annual report we indicated that the revaluation impact was 327 million as a result of those revals, and that's considerably more than what we had allowed for in our numbers with planning for based upon the Burl numbers. So Burl is conservative, and we have always applied those numbers.
So just so I'm clear here, conservative in terms of underestimating what has turned it when compared to the actual, or overestimated?
From my experience, through your Chair, I think the numbers tend to be underestimated. They're very, very conservative. It's cost us more.
Councillor Trillin?
Yeah, that was one of my lines as well around the inflation levels. I'm concerned that partly because of that historic trend, and then also I think given the fact that we've seen some pretty inflationary policy announced by central government as well, I think we're going to be seeing higher than 4%, and that's going to impact us too. In terms of overall with this paper, I obviously support it. There's been a lot of hard work that's gone into it. I think the key focus areas are good ones that do reflect our key priorities. So yeah, absolutely support that. And I guess just wanted to draw attention to and remind that 18.25%, that's not where we started. We started north of 20%, and we've done a lot of hard work to get it down as low as that. So yes, that does look tough, but I think this is us already actually being conservative with the amount that we need to spend, and we're trying as much as we can, obviously, to reduce everything. $60 million cut off our capital program is huge. So yeah, absolutely support this, and just want to thank officers for the hard work that has gone into this, and I'm sure there is going to be a whole lot more, because people are going to understandably be upset with this, I think, when we get into consultation next year, and there are lots of things that we would love to be able to deliver that we're not going to be able to deliver. So I guess my comment would just be that I really hope that people do engage, because we're going to have to make really tough decisions, and we are obviously always going to be influenced by the voices we hear the most of. So if people want to see particular things out of our LTP next year, please do engage, and we'll do our best. But yeah, absolutely support this. Thank you.
Councillor Leggett?
Obviously, I support it as well, given that I seconded it. But I note the points made by Councillor Trillin, good points. I think I also note in this program that whatever the inflation figures are, we're going to have to live with them. If we stick with this figure, then we're going to have to, and those figures are something different, then we're going to either have to make up for it or do more as a result. So the other thing I wanted to note that it was good to see that that officers have reviewed opportunities for increased revenue savings, and we've got another $1 million and another $750,000 worth of income. So that's a positive note in terms of messages to the community that we are actually, or council is doing its bit internally to make savings. It's unfortunate that we're not going to be able to deliver on all the things that we wanted to, but I think, as Josh has said, this reinforces particularly the progress that we've made in the Three Waters area, and will continue to deliver what we've said we're going to deliver. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Ford?
Thank you. Hey, this may well have been covered in the workshops, but I also asked the question. It's just around the page 2 of the CapEx property program. Just wanted some clarity or commentary, I guess, on the upgrades that are relating to Cannons Creek club rooms in comparison to the adventure. Let me go back to that page. Upgrades. Just the difference in that, and I wondered if maybe Kāinga Ora were stepping in there. There's just a big difference between what funding goes into Cannons Creek as opposed to adventure, and I think when we're talking about going out to our communities to convey how we arrived in those spaces, I just wanted to know how we did, and when the last, and actually in addition, when was the last upgrade to Cannons Creek club rooms made as well?
What diligent page is that, is it?
128. Yeah.
8. Sorry, 128.
Yeah.
And as I say, it may well have been covered in the workshop.
No, it wasn't, because Adventure's one of our, like Porirua Park, premier grounds for soccer, but they haven't told us what it's going to be. Is that you, Andrew?
Through the Mayor, I'll just get Parks. It'll be John Callahan and Parks. Will perhaps on the Friday email, we'll get it out to you, the information about it. It'll be because it's in the asset management plan for Parks, what's programmed for those specific pieces of works and the comparison between the two.
And is it likely that Kāinga Ora will contribute in that space as well?
No.
Okay.
Anybody else who wants to speak? Okay. Yes, Councillor Fellow.
It was just a question on the CapEx page as well, around what is the Three Waters Council projects? How are they different to the Wellington Water projects?
Through the Mayor, I think you're asking about the difference between the money we give to Wellington Water versus the money we keep in-house and are going to give to KO for the work they're doing in Porirua East, our contribution to the Bothamley Park sewer or the reservoir, etc., I think. And it might also be the bulk water that we keep in-house and don't give to Wellington Water, but we pay Greater Wellington Regional Council.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to to actually settle this, to be able to put this across the line. I know residents are not going to be happy with the size of the increase. We are similar to others in the region, but I would thank council staff and officers for the work and the councillors around the table. It's going to be a hard explain next year, and we're like households, you know, we all struggle. So I will move the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Thank you. We'll now move to the rating policy review. I'll move it to put it on the table. Seconded by Councillor Duncan. Oh, Councillor Duncan. Josh, do you want to speak to this first? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Baker. So I largely support the bulk of this policy. I think we've had a really good go at going through this and working through the issues and trying to land in a place where which meets as many of our objectives as possible. I do just want to draw attention back to the UAGC, which I talked a number of times about as we've been going through this process. I am still opposed to the UAGC, but both at the level of it being applied of 425, but also, to be honest, us having one at all. You'll recall that I was personally in favour of us having an option where we went to consultation of there being a zero UAGC option in consultation. I know from the process we've gone through so far that that is not the majority view around this table, and I accept that. So I'm not going to put forward any motion or amendment. I would like to request that 4B is put separately and indicate that I will be voting against that. I do support the rest of the rating policy review, while there are obviously always things that you change and look at a little bit differently. On the whole, I support the process that we've gone through, so I'm happy to support that policy. I do have one question in relation to 4D and the 4.5 ratio that has been recommended around the vacant land and empty derelict buildings. There was a comment, I can't remember exactly where it is, it's not in front of me at the second, but I recall a comment in the report around how while there was some support and consultation for even higher than 4.5, that may be viewed as unreasonable. And I wonder if we could just have some elaboration around that, what constitutes unreasonable, and when we say that, do we mean it from a legal threshold that could be challenged, or just unreasonable from a subjective perspective?
Which, Graham? Oops, over to you, Graham. Sorry, as I throw my pencil at Wendy.
Thank you for the question. We're trying to set it as consistent with the other councils in New Zealand who have set this, which is Christchurch and Wellington City, which have just now adopted it as well. So my comment around this is that we put this into place at the current level and we monitor it, and then we bring it back to council after a year or so, and then we bring it back. Is it working? The idea of this is a stick against those properties which are derelict and downgrade the city, and so we want to work with those owners to in the first instance for them to improve their property, and then if they're not going to do that, then we implement this. So we're wanting them to improve their properties. So in reality, we don't actually even want to charge this, because we want their properties improved. So it's to work through that process, and we were trying to set it in the first instance to be consistent with the other councils.
Cool, thank you. And so just to clarify on that, so that means when we say it's potentially unreasonable, that's not around concern of a legal challenge, but it's just more in line with what other councils are doing?
Correct.
Okay, cool. I think I support that approach that you've outlined about us starting at this level and coming back to it in a year or so. I think personally, if I had been submitting on this, I probably would have been more in favour of that 5-1, but I think going through with that process you've outlined, I think is reasonable. So yeah, I will be voting in support of the rest of this, other than 4B, the UAGC. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hayward?
Kia ora no. Following in a very similar vein to Councillor Trillin and my well-canvassed view around home equity remission, I would also like to request that point 6B, recommendation 6B, also be taken as a separate vote, and I will foreshadow that I will vote against that. Likewise, I will also be in alignment with my colleague in regards to 4B as well, not for precisely the same reasons, but as was highlighted in the vote with regards to going out to public consultation, that I still remain concerned about the seemingly ad hoc way that the determination of that value was emerged, and in the absence of being able to come up with, to my estimation, and that is not a reflection on officers, that's a reflection on myself as well, to come up with a reasonable alternative, that I cannot in good conscience vote for the value that's there. So I would just note those 2 points. I have no questions other than to also highlight points 13 and 16 of the submission by with regards to the work that is continued to be done with regard to the Tūre Whenua and what is freehold land for Māori. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett?
I just want to say that I think this is a very reasonable and balanced result of all the discussions that we've had so far and the information we've had from officers and also from putting it out to people to comment on. So I'll be supporting all of this. I think it's a good way forward, and we're indicating that there's further work to do in the future in particular areas, but that will be done. So absolutely support this.
Thank you. Councillor Wehapi?
I support this too, but in particular, I do really support number 4D. If you just look up in Cannons Creek, for example, when we were there for the opening, there's that horrible section of land there that has just got rubbish and crap dumped all over it. So in cases like that, we need to go hard with those ones.
Thank you. Any other comment? Okay, I'm going to put a lot of these individually. So I'm going to put 1, 2 and 3. So I'm moving, we receive, we note and adopt. So all those in favour? All those against? Carried. So I'll put 4A, C, D and E. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. 4B, all those in favour? Aye. All those against? Councillor Trillin and Councillor Hayward.
Point of order.
Thank you. Yes.
Can we have the votes recorded?
Yes, always.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll move to 5A. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. 6A and C. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. 6B. All in favour? All against? Councillor Hayward, Councillor Ford. Carried. So then I'll put the balance. We've got number C, A to D. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Now we move to, as I follow, revenue and rating policy review. I'll move it to put it on the table. Seconded by Councillor Trillin. Open for discussion. Anybody got any discussion on this one? We've been through quite a lot. Okay. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Yep, nearly there. 10.9, Wellington Regional Waste Management Minimisation Plan. Move it to put it on the table. Seconded by Councillor Hayward. Yes. Open for discussion. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the presiding member on behalf of our council on the regional committee that has worked on this regional waste minimisation plan, I come here to encourage us to support these recommendations. My reflections on my time around that committee were that we did get a number of submitters from Porirua who have had their views reflected in the final plan. It is hard to wrestle with so many regional and city councils and district councils who all have differing positions and differing communities in meeting those expectations. However, one thing we are all united in is that under the previous plan, we did not make significant progress in reducing the amount of waste that ends up in landfill. This plan, alongside the local action plans that each council do, will make an impact. However, there are things within this document that still have to go through long-term plan. And so the challenge is upon all of us next year, specifically with regards to organic diversion, construct C&D diversion as well, and household collection. These are weighty issues, but we are also needing to be mindful of reflecting our community's expectation to reduce the amount of landfill that is being accumulated in order to make sure that it is safer for people who deal with the fumes from organic waste near the landfill itself, to reduce the burden of ETS charges which are met by all users of the landfill, to take action on something that will help families pay less for having their rubbish disposed with, their waste disposed with, and also to try and find another way out of preventing fly tipping in the community. With that, kia ora koutou.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? All right, I'll move the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Now I'll move we go into non-public, seconded by Councillor Ford. All those in favour? Carried.